Hello, everybody who has joined us so far. We're just waiting for a few more minutes before we start to allow people to get on. But do put your name and where you've come from and your role in the chat, so we've got a sense of who's joining us for this event this afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, everybody. I can see we're up to 30 people now, so that's great. Welcome to everybody to this LSBU event, which is going to be a debate. So we hope you all come with your thoughts and your questions and ready to ask our panelists about their opinions and to challenge them on their viewpoints that are presented in this debate. Do put your name, your role, where you've come from in the chat, so we've got a sense of who's joining us this afternoon. We'll just wait one more minute, I should say, and then we'll get started. Your chat is disabled. So Jane, is it possible that we can make the chat available to attendees? It's usually how it works.
Sorry, so I'm not sure that will work on the webinar format.
Yeah, we've always done that before.
Q&A.
Yeah, so there's two bits. There's a Q&A section and there's a chat section. So you should be able to put them in either the Q&A or the chat. Jane, which one should they put there?
In the Q&A.
Yeah, so if you pop it in the Q&A. We usually have both, but these things change every time you use them. So. Okay, so I think we'll get started because it's 3 minutes past 11. So first of all, welcome to everybody who's joined us this afternoon for our debate. This debate forms part of the Health Education London region integrated clinical academic bridging schemes, and it is the post-doctoral bridging scheme, which is for people who have a doctoral qualification and are looking to take the next step on the career pathway towards a post-doctoral clinical academic career. And we are really fortunate today to have 4 people with us who are going to undertake the debate for us. And I'm going to hand over now to Dr. Leslie, who is going to chair the debate and who's going to take you through the process of it. So over to you, Leslie.
You're on mute, Leslie.
Sorry about that, but good start. I've shared my screen now, so we're just going to, I'd like to also add my welcome to you. This is the 5th debate presented by this postdoctoral bridging group, and we are the 3rd cohort of this group. So today, my name is Leslie Catchburian. I'm a consultant physiotherapist in paediatric neurodisability at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and also lead clinical academic for the group at Great Ormond Street. I'm part of the 2023 cohort, and it's my great pleasure to chair this debate today. Now, the debate aims to explore in depth both sides of a contemporary argument facing our sector at the moment. So this morning, we are debating the motion, are non-medical professionals marginalised when seeking research opportunities and funding? And we really hope as a group that by drilling down into the issues on both sides of this argument, we will learn more about it, clarify our thinking, and move maybe a step closer towards improving our clinical academic sector. Now, these arguments today will be context specific and explore the theory regarding marginalisation, which we hope will have an impact on the debate around clinical academic practice in this area. So debating for the motion today, we have starting up Dr. Liz Dunn. She is the lead nurse for education and patient experience in oncology at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Trust. And we also have Dr. Helena Habdi Azrez, who is the lead clinical academic research nurse in diabetes and chronic kidney disease at the Royal Free London Foundation Trust. Debating against the motion, we have Dr. Nikki Wilson, who is a consultant physiotherapist at King's College Foundation Trust, and also Dr. Gemma Clooney, who is a senior clinical academic for speech and language therapy at Imperial College Healthcare Trust. So we really would welcome your comments in the question and answers, not the chat. And also, if you could make a comment on Twitter or share your thoughts on Twitter, we'd really welcome that as well. But we ask you as well to make these comments rational, reasonable and respectful for our debaters today, which I'm sure you will do. And we'd also really like to remind you that our debaters may only be expressing this opinion just for the purpose of this debate, and it may not be their own personal opinion. So also for brevity, when we talk about nursing and allied health professionals in today's debate, we're actually talking about all professions which are allied to medicine, and we're not excluding any of these professions at all. So we've opened the poll, and I think you might have that on your screen. And we'd like you to vote now at the beginning of our debate to answer this poll. Are non-medical professionals marginalised when seeking research opportunities and funding? And we will also repeat this at the end of the debate and we can compare the results. So I'd like to hand over to Dr. Liz Dunn, who's going to open the debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Dunn and I work at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospitals, and I'm delighted to be here today. Next slide, please.
Liz, can we just hold 2 seconds while we give people a chance to respond to the poll question, and then we'll close it so that they can focus on your talk.
Of course. So,
just give people another couple of minutes. Whilst they're doing that, I should have said in the introduction that I am one of the co-leads of this scheme. Completely forgot to tell you that until Leslie was introducing the session. My name's Suzanne Bench and I'm Professor of Critical Care Nursing at London South Bank University and Director of Nursing for Research at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital. So I'm hoping that people have had the opportunity to vote by now. And Jane, if we just count down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you, Jane. Do you want to close the poll? And we'll move over to you, Liz. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So in this morning's debate, I'm arguing for the motion that non-medical professionals are marginalised when seeking opportunities and funding to participate in research compared to their medical colleagues. In presenting my argument, I will highlight some of the historical, educational and political factors that I believe are significant and provide evidence for this case. Next slide, please. Firstly, it's useful to define marginalisation in relation to my argument, and I'm using the Oxford Dictionary of Sociology's definition, where marginalisation describes both a process and a condition that prevents individuals or groups from full participation in social, economic and political life. As a condition, it can prevent individuals from actively participating. Next slide, please. And so what do we mean by research opportunities? For today's debate, we're considering research training, participating in research studies, undertaking clinical research fellowships, through to substantive employment as a clinical academic and leading research. Next slide, please. In support of my argument, I'll firstly define how the medical profession established themselves and gained not only status, but dominance within the healthcare system. The Medical Act of 1858 brought about the body we know today as the General Medical Council, the first of 3 professional groups to regulate qualifications and keep an up-to-date register of practitioners. Friedson and Willis highlight this important landmark as emphasising the unique nature of the medical workforce in controlling the content and terms of its work and the power of self-regulation, protecting any boundary encroachment by less powerful groups. In fact, Friedson first coined the term professional dominance, illustrating the authority that medicine has enjoyed, extending beyond self-regulation and control to acquiring power over other professions, notably the allied health and nursing professions. This has been exemplified in practice where allied health professionals and nurses have historically acted under the direction of the medical professional. Next slide, please. With research firmly embedded in the medical curriculum and career trajectory, doctors have the opportunity to develop their confidence and competence in research at an early stage under the direction of credible leaders. From the inception of the National Institute of Health Research in 2006, medical professionals have been successful in securing funding for research and have been well represented on the award judging panels, alongside scientists, methodologists, and statisticians. My colleague in the fore-argument in this debate will be showing you some evidence of this shortly. With randomised controlled trials at the top of the research hierarchy, evidence shows that a larger proportion of funding is appropriated towards these rather than for observational studies, not always, but more likely to be carried out by nurses and AHPs. I'm aware that the NIHR are making significant efforts to address these inequalities. In fact, in recognition of this, a call has recently been put out for the Research for Patient Benefit grants eligible to nurses only, but this is the first year that this has ever happened. Next slide, please. In nursing, I think it's fair to say that opinion remains divided amongst scholars and practitioners as to the content and proportion of practical training and theory within the curriculum. You may well say that it's within nursing's gift to design the training we want, but I just want to highlight some significant examples of historical and political factors that have influenced curriculum development. Scholars such as Hall identify the Industrial Revolution as reinforcing anti-intellectualism amongst nursing students and educators due to an overriding focus on technical knowledge and the use of technology to deliver nursing programmes. Racine and Vandenberg argue that modern-day universities' mission to prepare students for employability in the neoliberal labour market has detracted from the opportunity to gain intellectual, cultural and social enrichment. Whilst acknowledging the legitimacy of gaining practical skills during training, they argue that the dominance of doing over thinking may undermine the acquisition of theoretical knowledge to guide practice. Degree-level training came into being for AHPs in the 1980s and in 2009 for nursing. Progression to master's level education offered the first real opportunity to engage in critical thinking and research methodology training. However, students often conduct a literature review for their dissertation due to time and funding constraints, and involvement in empirical research is therefore limited. Clearly, developing research skills is critical to integrating research into clinical practice and building clinical academic careers. And again, I would argue that nurses and AHPs are at a disadvantage when compared to their medical colleagues. Next slide, please. So what are the policies supporting the value of research? A plethora of policies, strategies and plans have been launched to drive the clinical research agenda, including the Department of Health and Social Care's vision for research, reflected in the NHS long-term plan of 2022. Specific to medicine, the Royal College of Physicians Research for All, developing, delivering and driving better research, is based on a survey of 1,100 physicians. Whilst highlighting some of the barriers they experience, including time inequity, 80% of the respondents state that they are research active, demonstrating how well established this aspect of their practice is. In contrast, the Allied Health Professionals Research and Innovation Strategy and Making Research Matter, Chief Nursing Officer for England's Strategic Plan for Research, are significantly different. Next slide, please. The thrust of the AHP strategy is to build research capacity and capability, have equitable and sustainable support and infrastructure, and to contribute to a culture where research is everyone's business. Next slide, please. The Chief Nursing Officer's research strategy, whilst aspirational in its vision, also recognises the relative infancy of a research culture in practice settings and the pressing need to develop a career framework for nurses and midwives. Research is referred to as a golden thread for the future of the nursing profession. Next slide, please. In preparing for this debate, I interviewed a number of key senior figures in the hospital where I work, and this is what they have to say. I won't read this, I'll just give you a couple of seconds just to get the thrust of those. Okay, thank you. Leslie, next slide, please. I want to conclude with an example in my own hospital trust, which is by no means representative across the UK. Our chief nurse is wholly committed to implementing the CNO's research strategy. A director and deputy director for research have been appointed, launching ACORN, a centre of research for nurses and midwives, whose purpose it is to build capacity and capability in research. The golden thread has started to be woven. Next slide, please. However, as it stands today, out of 2,631 medical colleagues employed at my hospital trust, seen on the left-hand side, there are currently 81 with clinical trials being supported by NIHR grants. Out of 2,000 AHPs, there are just 10. And out of 9,000 nurses, we have one undertaking a doctoral clinical and practitioner academic fellowship. 1 out of 9,000. Furthermore, our AHP and nurse consultants and advanced practitioners struggle to gain funding support for their research and to give this particular pillar of practice equal priority. As such, despite the glimmer of real hope and bold national strategies, I firmly believe that nurses and AHPs remain marginalised in their quest for equity in research participation and funding. Final slide, please. For this reason, I urge you to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz, for opening the debate for us today. And I'm going to hand over straight away now to Dr. Nikki Wilson, who's going to share her slides.
Good morning, everyone. Just bear with me while I share my slides with you. So thank you very much, Liz, and thank you, Leslie, and good morning, everyone. My name is Nikki Wilson, and I'm a consultant physiotherapist at King's College Hospital and a postdoctoral researcher. Today, I'm arguing against the motion that non-medical professionals are marginalised when seeking research opportunities and funding compared to their medical colleagues. We're all aware of inequalities in clinical academia, in particular the underrepresentation of ethnic minority groups and women. But is there evidence of inequality as a result of professional background? In this presentation, I'm going to focus on 3 areas. First, I want to revisit marginalisation and draw attention to 2 key components of the concept that I think are fundamental to this debate. Second, I'm going to set out some of the many opportunities available to non-medical professionals to participate in research, thereby strengthening their involvement in clinical academia. And finally, I'm going to explore NIHR personal funding awarded to non-medical and medical professionals in the last 2 decades. I hope that by the end of my presentation, you will be convinced that on the basis of professional background, there is no marginalising of professionals outside of medicine seeking research opportunities and funding. So let's start with revisiting marginalisation. Marginalisation is a process via which people are pushed to the periphery based on their identities, their associations, experiences, or environments. If marginalisation did exist, as suggested in the debate motion, these identities would be non-medical professionals. Marginalisation is a dynamic phenomenon with margins or boundaries at the centre. It associates with fewer opportunities to participate and increased distance to resource, either real or perceived. And I want you to keep these 2 marginalising effects in mind as we go through the next few slides. Historically, healthcare professionals outside of medicine have been slower to take up clinical academia. The head start that medical clinical academics have can in part be explained by availability of integrated research opportunities, whilst undertaking medical training, for example, the intercalated BSc and Aspire programs, and the Academic Foundation Programme for foundation year doctors. But both medical and non-medical clinical academics face challenges in pursuing and maintaining a clinical academic career. In this study by Trusson et al., medics, nurses, midwives, and AHPs pursuing a clinical academic career reported similar barriers, including obtaining funding, being released from clinical work to undertake academic training, and identifying suitable clinical academic positions. Both medical and non-medical professionals also suffered financial penalties as a result of pursuing clinical academia, albeit at different stages during their careers. These factors contribute to a leaky pipeline, an analogy commonly used to describe clinical academia. And while data on effective interventions to reduce leakage are limited, a review of available studies by Rain et al. Published last year highlighted that multifaceted interventions, incorporating protected time and mentorship, seem to offer a way to plug holes. And there is clear evidence of these sorts of interventions specifically for non-medical professionals to increase research opportunities and help reduce the historical gap in clinical academia between medics and non-medics. For example, the NIHR has recently launched a new scheme to encourage professionals outside of medicine into the pipeline. The Insight scheme, which is for early career, including undergraduate, registered healthcare, social work, and public health professionals, but not doctors or dentists, aims to broaden opportunities for research, particularly for underrepresented groups, and complements national, regional, and local clinical academic internship opportunities. Then, to support professionals outside of medicine into the next part of the pipeline, bridging schemes have been put in place. These offer protected time and mentorship opportunities to support non-medical professionals develop NIHR and other competitive funding research award applications. And then to sustain the flow of activity through the pipeline is an initiative to strengthen careers for underrepresented disciplines and specialisms, including nurses, midwives, and AHPs. As my colleague Liz mentioned, earlier this year, the Research for Patient Benefit Scheme launched a funding call specifically for nurses and midwives. A further funding call for AHPs is anticipated later this year. And these interventions aimed at underrepresented groups, inclusive of non-medical professionals, are enhanced through a multitude of other enablers in the form of policy developments, emphasising that research is everybody's business, support networks, and cross-sector collaborations directed towards increased research capacity and capability of healthcare professionals outside of medicine. So, moving on to research funding. And I'm using the success rate of applicants to clinical academic personal NIHR awards as a proxy for distance from reward. In this study by Malve et al., they explored NIHR application and personal awards data between 2007 and 2016. The authors sought to identify the most important factors associated with application numbers and success rates. They extracted data on a range of variables from over 4,000 complete applications for personal awards within their IAT, ICA, and fellowship training programs, including professional background and whether or not the application was successful. In relation to professional background, the authors did identify variation in success rate between professions, but after adjusting for other factors, these differences were no longer significant. There was, however, one exception. Applicants from an AHP background who had not held a previous NIHR award were more successful than medics in securing awards for senior clinical academics. These data, courtesy of Professor Dillo, Dean of the NIHR Academy, show the number of applications to the Academy and awardee success rate by different professional groups in the years 22 to 23. We can see that around half of allied health, nurse, social work, and other HCP applicants, and 80% of midwives who applied for an NIHR award were successful. In contrast, the success rate of medically qualified applicants was only 27%, suggesting a greater proximity to reward for non-medical professionals compared to medical clinical academics. So drawing to a close, I mentioned at the beginning that marginalisation is a process whereby people are pushed to the edges, the impact of which is reduced opportunity to participate and increased distance from reward. I've presented information that shows no evidence of either of these effects in relation to the non-medical clinical academic workforce when compared to medical clinical academics. I believe the motion should be refuted. Thank you.
I think we've lost Leslie.
Right.
Okay, so thank you for that. So we're next going to hand over to Helena, who is going to support the argument for the motion that non-medical healthcare professionals are marginalised. So Helena, can I hand over to you, please?
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Liz and Nikki. I'm just now going to share my slides. Bear with me. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Good morning and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Helena. I'm the lead clinical academic research nurse in diabetes and chronic kidney disease at the Royal Free London and advanced practitioner at Moorfields Eye Hospital. In the next few minutes, I'll be explaining why I feel non-medical professionals are marginalised when seeking research opportunities. Sorry, one second. I'm just having trouble in moving my slides. Can you all see my slides?
It's moved on to a slide with two sections. One says access to research fellowship.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suzanne. The two key areas I will focus my arguments on are funding and job opportunities, and I'll be making reference to this point throughout my talk. Access to research fellowship and research grant funding for non-medical professionals are limited. We all know what a competitive and time-consuming these processes are. In addition, there's a lack of infrastructure to support career progression within the NHS for non-medical clinical academic roles. Core difference lies in research training exposure and career path. Our medical colleagues have a good exposure to research at undergraduate, foundation and specialty levels. My colleague Liz highlighted this hasn't been the case for nurses and AHPs. When we look at career path, our medical colleagues have clearly delineated career path and infrastructure to support clinical activities. Career path structure that connects training progress and enables people to advance through time to a better jobs. Clinical academic roles are rare for non-clinical medical academics, and leadership are even scarce. Joint appointments are seen as a gold standard to growing, retaining the non-medical clinical academic workforce. However, this again is rare, with pockets of good practice in some parts of the country, such as Nottingham, Newcastle, Guy's and St Thomas's, Barts and London. By no means this is a standard practice today. Currently, 0.1% of the nursing workforce compared to 4.6% of the medical workforce are clinical academic. I'm sure you will agree with me, for greater research impact, the non-medical clinical academic workforce need to be supported and capacity must be increased. The Association of UK University and Hospital Group set a target to increase this by 1% for non-medical health professionals by 2030. Compared to 5% for medical professions for the same year. I'll leave it to the audience to answer whether this target for non-medical professionals is too ambitious or not ambitious enough. Clinical Academic Role Implementation Network was established in 2017 to promote the development and implementation of joint clinical academic roles. The latest survey results are shown on the slide. 37 organizations responded to their survey, which included acute and specialist trusts. Of those, 19% of the organizations who responded did not have substantive non-medical clinical academic leads. Whilst the survey sample is small, it arguably reflects the key challenge for non-medical clinical academic careers across the UK. I'm now going to share the empirical evidence that highlights the historical inequalities in regards to funding opportunities for non-medical health professionals. Mulvey and colleague undertook a cohort study to identify factors most associated with application numbers and success rate for NIHR awards. They found variation in the success rate across different professional backgrounds and in terms of applicants. First, I want to draw your attention to the second column, which is looking at the number of rejections. So this is the column I'm looking at. So if you look at the bottom two rows, AHPs and nurses are the ones that had the highest rejection rate, 75.9% for AHPs and 82.2% for nurses. When we look at the adjusted model, which is model 1, in terms of the relative risk ratio, compared to medics, nurses and midwives are 28% less likely to be successful. In adjusted model, this result persisted at 28%, losing statistical significance by a small margin. I think this p-value is 0.06. In addition, the authors highlighted approximately 4 times as many awards were made to medics compared to nurses. This slide highlights the NIHR application and award by profession for the year 2022-2023. Whilst this recent data highlights an important shift in terms of successful awards, the number of medical professionals applying for this award remains high. In this case, 255 for medical professions, 98 for AHPs, and 41 for nurses. Non-medical professionals are the largest workforce. If you look at the denominator at the bottom of the graph, for AHPs, we have 185,000 registered AHPs. So the numbers applying for are about 98, which highlights that not enough of us are applying for these opportunities. Many of you on the call would remember the recent parliamentary inquiry into clinical academics. The committee explored the work of clinical academics in the NHS and the challenge they face post-COVID-19. The committee defined clinical academics as qualified doctors who combine work as a specialist doctor with research or teaching responsibilities. I'm sure you would agree with me that failure to mention nurses and allied health professionals within this inquiry exemplifies the marginalisation. Just to conclude, despite the contribution of NIHR and strong national policies, the non-medical clinical academics continue to lag behind that of the medical profession. The future of non-medical clinical academic careers could be brighter with concentrated national drive to promote this post with targeted funding. For this reason, I urge you to support this motion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Helena, for that. That was excellent. And just to give time for our final speaker, speaking against the motion, Dr. Gemma Clooney, to get her slides ready, we'll ask her to share now. Thank you. And please do put your questions in the question and answer chat.
Hi, it's fabulous to be here. My name is Gemma, and I'm going to be arguing that non-medical healthcare professionals are not marginalised when seeking research opportunities and funding compared to their medical colleagues. I'm going to be developing from Nikki's argument against the motion. Nikki has shown the plethora of opportunities non-medical healthcare professionals have in terms of opportunities to participate in research and their access to funding awards. I'm going to develop this further to consider the national context in terms of strategy and policy, and that the challenges clinical academics experience are not specific to our professions, and most importantly, that even thinking in these terms is unhelpful and unproductive. This document, entitled Future-Proofing UK Health Research, was published earlier this year by a group of 30 experts, including research leaders both established and emerging, patients, carers, and multi-sector representatives. It is a key document exploring the undeniable threats to UK health research and the steps needed to protect it. At no point is there a distinction made between medical and non-medical clinical academics, except to repeatedly emphasise that the term clinical academic comprises all professions: medics, dentists, nurses, midwives, AHPs, pharmacists, psychologists, healthcare scientists, and on. This document and its recommendations use terms such as team science or skills specialist, with repeated focus on the value and importance of interdisciplinary work in combating the challenges to UK health research. There is not a hint of marginalisation, and most importantly, the clarion call of the document is to place people at the heart of sustainable health research. In this context, people refers to both the professionals and the patients involved. Non-medical professionals are absolutely integral to the solutions recommended by this report, and its existence demonstrates the acknowledgement of the non-medical clinical academic role in modern healthcare research. So what are the challenges, and where do we fit in the solutions? Most importantly, how does this demonstrate that we are not being marginalised? So we know research culture and career structures can be inflexible, precarious, and exclusive. There is little multi-directional movement of research talent between the public, private, and charitable sectors. We know that the existing funding model fails to cover the full cost of healthcare research and relies heavily on cross-subsidy. And finally, we all know that our healthcare system is struggling to embed healthcare research. However, these challenges exist for every clinical academic. They are not just limited to non-medics. Sometimes the narrative we choose to describe ourselves with implies that the struggle is worse for us. And perhaps historically that was the case. But now in 2023, I challenge that this is A, unhelpful, and B, undermines all the work we already do, which features at the heart of the solutions suggested in this report. These solutions include these key points: that every integrated care board, NHS trust, and health board should be valuing and promoting research, that there should be flexibility in dual careers by recognising the value of clinical academics to HEIs and to the NHS, with reinvestment in career opportunities for them. The NHS organisations, funders, and HEIs should be offering dedicated time for research to those healthcare professionals who wish to engage in it. And ultimately, that in creating a culture that truly values patient involvement in order to make the research landscape fully patient-centred, we will make a difference to the challenges that currently exist. None of these solutions offer anything other than a team approach, and there is certainly no hint that there is any professional marginalisation. In fact, I would argue and will argue that the patient-centred nature of this policy document and the national shift towards this as the core element to health and social care research benefits us as non-medical healthcare professionals. Why? In general, we are desperate to join the research pipeline because of our patients, not because it's part of our training, not because it's the only way we can get a job, but because we genuinely care about them and we want to make things better. We understand fundamentally how to engage them in research. In fact, this study published in 2021 showed that the medical curriculum in the UK promotes an old-fashioned, more paternalistic model of care with discrete person-centred care components in specific sections throughout their curriculum. This was compared to the nursing and midwifery curriculum with a more collaborative model involving patients and people-centred care distributed throughout. In other words, nurses and midwives, and I would argue all other non-medical healthcare professionals, from training onwards, are comfortable with engaging patients and person-centred care from training into our research. Looking forward, this actually places non-medics in a much stronger position in the research landscape. As a patient advisor once said to me, what is the point of research if it doesn't change clinical care for the better? And we're really good at that, and we're not marginalised. Returning to documents highlighted earlier in the debate, the Health Education England AHP Innovation and Research Strategy, the Nursing and Midwifery Research Strategies, they all highlight a vision and a framework for people-centered research to empower non-medics to lead, participate, and deliver research and evidence-based practice. It's true, our frameworks may not be as rigidly designed or historically embedded as those of our medical colleagues, but they do exist, and their flexibility and freshness allows us to be solution-focused, nimble-footed, and find the spaces where we can thrive within the research landscape. I would argue non-medics are only marginalised if we choose to be, and this is not a choice I am willing to make. So in summary, non-medical healthcare professionals are not marginalised when seeking research opportunities and funding compared to their medical colleagues. We have a choice. We can sit in the wings complaining about the lack of opportunity, or we can claim our space and demonstrate our value and our power, because research is everyone's business, no matter what their profession. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gemma. That was excellent. What a great debate we've had so far. I'd like to thank all of our speakers on for and against. That was absolutely fantastic. We have had quite a few questions in the chat, and so I'd like to basically ask the panel. I won't ask you directly, but you can tell me who would like to answer these questions. There's a lovely comment here about a question, anonymous, saying, I wonder how much the paternalistic and hierarchical model of the NHS, along with embedded racism and sexism, impacts on this. As a nurse who is female and a person of the global majority, like many of my nursing colleagues, I often feel an unspoken expectation to know my place. AHPs seem to be doing a lot better than nurses. Is it to do with how we perceive our nursing roles, or is it about race and gender? Or is it something else? Would anybody like to answer that question, comment on that question?
I think it's a really good point. I think ultimately that the paternalistic nature of all of our professions and the marginalisation that does clearly exist if you are a woman, if you are from the global majority, we can't deny that. But my feeling would be that that isn't related to our profession specifically, that it's a much broader kind of contextual issue. I don't know if any of my colleagues would like to comment.
Yes, I agree with you, Gemma. When looking at evidence around inequity in clinical academia, it is striking the data around ethnicity and women. So again, I don't think this is profession specific. I think it's across the board.
Excellent. No, I would agree strongly on that as well. We've also had a comment from one of the participants, Caroline Alexander, who's also congratulated you all on a great debate and thanked you for your presentations. As she responds, she says she thinks the answer is nuanced and has context, which is hard to answer, but it's a yes or no answer in our poll, obviously. So if we think about the career structure outside of fellowships, which I know we've debated a lot within our group, we need to think about this as well. We sense that the answer differs to the funding position to support us following these fellowships. What do the participants think about how we will deal with the growing and successful funding that's flowing in to us as AHPs and non-medical professionals without a career structure to come back on in order to take advantage of progressing these skills and cultural shift? Would anybody like to talk about that?
Leslie, I'm happy just to start with that one. So I think this speaks to Gemma's point about team science, that actually the answer may lie, or one of the answers to this may lie in team working and getting involved with other professions and disciplines around funding awards to take the work forward.
That's true. Would anybody else like to comment?
I can complement what Nikki said. I think we would need to think about job planning, time, and you know, as well as appropriate funding for these roles. I mean, these roles are not currently standard practice, and they're not available in every NHS trust, as I shared on some of my slides. So I think we need to think about centrally funding these roles and just making them a standard practice across NHS, and that probably will help, as well as making sure having that we have this as part of our job plans.
Exactly.
I would just say, yeah, I would just add, in the trust where I work, there's a lot of emphasis on the advanced practice, you know, across all the professions, and the HEE funding for those, and a lot of debate around how we build those into the infrastructure. So as well as the things that are going on that I mentioned in my side of the debate, I think there's quite a lot of progress that's being made. You know, as ever, it's going to be trying to find funding and also to make the priority research in those roles, as it has been for nurse consultants and I'm sure AHP consultants. There's so many other pressures of you know, the clinical work that to get through, particularly at the moment, that it's quite difficult. But I do think there's, you know, there's definitely some hope there.
Excellent, yeah, thank you. Sarah Pope also comments that the arguments against marginalisation are very strong. However, the reality on the ground is very different to the national picture that those against the motion present. Would anybody like to comment on that?
Only to say, Sarah, that, oh, sorry, Gemma.
That's right.
I just wanted to say that we had tried to get a broader perspective, and it's quite difficult to get data from funding organisations around the allocation of awards to the different professions. So I agree that our presentation is a bit skewed towards the national picture, but it's difficult to gather that data.
That's true. And Gemma, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I suppose I would just say that even if that is the feeling that you have in your current situation, if you just sit with that feeling and don't challenge it and don't try and push against those boundaries, then we're not going to move beyond where we've always been. And I suppose I am fortunate to work in an organisation where there have been people who have been doing that work for a long time, but they have made significant gains. And it is a little bit like you have to start somewhere. We have to stop feeling as though we're kind of the poor cousins to our medical colleagues, and recognise that, as Nikki kind of referenced earlier, that we're far better working together rather than kind of fighting against each other. And I suppose that's my feeling, is that we need to build those relationships, kind of work out who are the movers and shakers where you are, and kind of and forge a relationship with them, and demonstrate the value that we can not just add but bring for our patients.
That's an excellent point. And Liz, obviously you highlighted within your trust that there's definitely strong moves to acknowledge the role that non-medical professionals play in research. Would you agree?
Yes, I do. I think my final slide of just demonstrating, you know, that we are behind the curve. I completely take Gemma's view. You know, if you think you're marginalised, you kind of are. And not all people that are said to be marginalised feel it. You know, there's a depth to that argument too. But I think the figures do show an inequity currently. It doesn't stop us, and I'm absolutely with the rest of the group that we're here you know, to push forward and to demonstrate to our younger workforce what the possibilities are for the future.
So to break those glass ceilings. Yeah.
Indeed.
Great. So Sarah Pope, we've got quite a few questions. So I'll just take one or two more, if that's okay, from a time point of view. So Sarah Pope also commented on the same thing, Liz, saying that how can we ensure that visions you describe become embedded in individual trusts? And I think that's a larger question, really, isn't it? So one of the final questions we've got today from Sarah Edney is, given the inbuilt research training in medical schools and the number of academically inclined students going into medical training, could it be argued that the percentage success in NIHR wards should be even higher in medics than it is? Are they the ones being marginalised? Would anybody like to answer that?
I mean, that's a great point. Thank you very much, Sarah. But I think actually the one thing that I really feel quite strongly is that this sense that as kind of non-medical, and I don't like that term either for anyone out there who is uncomfortable being defined by what you're not. We make these really powerful choices to be clinical academics. If you're a medic, it's not really a choice. Whether you want it or not, you sort of have to try and get a publication just to get a foundation year job. And the competition is so significant that it means that there probably are quite a lot of medical professionals perhaps out there where they're not that invested in doing research or being clinical academics, but they don't have a huge amount of choice, which is a different kind of marginalisation perhaps, but it also then means that they're not necessarily going to be pushing towards getting funding, whereas we recognise that in order to be able to kind of demonstrate our mission, that's how we have to work and what we have to go for. So there's definitely something there about the differences.
Interesting. Anybody else want to comment on that, Liz?
Yeah, I think that is interesting, because in the Royal College of Physicians survey that I mentioned earlier, actually a huge percentage ticked the box of doing research because it would get career progression, or it would look very good on the CV, rather than the sort of more altruistic, research for patient gain. Yeah. Just saying, I'm sure they believe it would as well, but it was a high percentage that ticked that box.
Okay, that's a very good point. So very quick final question, which I think brings up the difference between the AHPs and the nurses. Somebody's asked that the term AHPs is a broad term for very different professional groups, which we're aware of, and we tried to allude to this about professionals allied to medicine. Do any of the panel have any insights into the variation of success rates across the professions? And I think both sides highlighted some of this. For example, physiotherapy training post versus radiography training post, and what learning we can take within this AHP group, rather than just comparing to medics or AHPs versus nurses and midwives.
I'll just start with a comment on that, because yes, I agree, and if we'd got more time, I think we could have delved into that a bit more, but just relating it back to the advanced practice roles, I know that we've had quite a lot of success for physiotherapists and nurses within Guy's and St Thomas's. I know I only talked to that trust, but we recently really celebrated that a pharmacist has been successful, and it was a cause of huge celebration. So I do recognise that there might be groups that are feeling marginalised even within the marginalised group, larger group.
Thank you. Right, so I was just going to I think we're running out of time now. We've only got 8 minutes left, and I was going to call on Suzanne as well to talk about, should we actually set up the poll again? So we can have a little look and see whether people's feelings have changed. And I'll leave, if I could ask Jane just to put the poll up again on the screen.
And just to, whilst people are voting in the poll, Caroline Alexander has just mentioned that there are going to be radiographer and pharmacist incubators coming on stream soon by the NIHR to support their progression. Just a little bit of a plug there for those people in those professions.
Really good, thank you. So, and Suzanne, did you want to make a comment while we're waiting for the final? Should we give another 10 seconds? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, rookie error. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for presenting both sides of the debate so articulately. I think you could easily be swayed one way or the other, and I'm really excited to see which way we're going. But I think regardless of the outcome of the poll, the importance of debates like this is really highlighted. The fact that we have that opportunity to thrash out some of these issues in the public domain and really work towards that aspiration for clinical, academic and research opportunities for every healthcare professional. Not just healthcare professionals outside of medicine, because as some of you alluded to, this is about what we do for patient benefit, isn't it? So, so thank you all. It was a great debate as always, and I think Jane has closed the poll while we're talking because it's disappeared off of my screen. So Jane, perhaps we can see the results now, if that's possible. I feel like we should have a drum roll at this point. But
would you like to start by seeing the results at the start?
We would.
Yes, please. That would be great.
So this is at the start of the debate.
Okay, so there was an overwhelming, it looked like, majority of people, 78%, who felt that it is true that non-medical healthcare professionals are marginalised as clinical academics, 78% to 22%. So thank you, Jane. Let's see what difference your presentations have made. Ooh, okay, so we do have a bit of a shift, and those that were presenting against the motion have definitely swayed some of the audience here, but those that were debating for the argument just about have taken it still, with 68% versus 32%. So thank you all for your contribution to that. And I think that just to say that I think that more discussion is needed. And just finally, before we close today, to remind you all that you'll all get a recording, a link to the recording of today's debate. Please do share your thoughts on Twitter so we can have a wider conversation, as Leslie said at the beginning. And finally, just to make you aware that we have another debate coming up in November of this year. So do look out on our events page for that. And let us know if you have any other ideas. I think the cohorts are always really keen to debate the issues that are in your heads as well. So Leslie, I don't know if there's anything final from you before we close.
I just want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our thoughts, and we really would like to continue this conversation on Twitter. So if possible, we'd like to hear, or even personally to us via LSBU as well. So please do encourage further debate within your centres. Thank you for the speaker.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great Friday afternoon and weekend. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.